you're allowed to learn in Kollel. We're learning about Assur Kollel. Okay, it seems like not everybody holds of Assur Kollel. So machlokes if you hold of Assur Kollel. Assur Moisef, everybody holds of. So let's a little bit later on. Now we are up to the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Aleph, Amud Beis, towards the bottom. A simple Mishnah. Gimel Achen, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Nesuin Gimel Machrios, married to 3 women that were not related to each other. We'll call them A, B, and C. Umeis Echad Mehem. Reuben was Nifter, and A falls to Yibam, and Shimon makes Yibam on A. But also Ba Hasheni Maimer. Shimon made only Maimer. He wasn't Koyneser. He just made Maimer on her. Umeis. And now Shimon dies, and A and B fall to Yibam to Levi. They don't get to make Yibam to make Chalitza. Why? When there's a woman that's falling from one household, from one deceased, that's when you do Yibam, then Yevamos Yavi Aleha. Misha Aleha Zikas Yavim Echad, Eloisha Aleha Zikas Beis Yevamos. This woman A not only is still falling from Reuben because there was no Yibam made, nor was there a Chalitza made, there was just a Maimer made, but she's also falling to Yibam from Shimon because Shimon made Kedushin on her. So she's a woman who's falling to Levi with 2 Chiyuvim of Yibam. And that's something that the Pasuk is Megala, that if a woman's falling with 2 things, there's no din Yibam over there. Let's see Rashi. There's a long Rashi here, but it's an easy Rashi. Until Shimon does the actual Yibam, Adayin Zikas Rishon Alel, there still is the Zika of Reuben upon this woman A. But there's also an additional Zika on this woman because of the relationship that was started by Shimon when he made Maimer. So when Shimon dies, Noisru Allah remains on woman A, Zika Shneim, the connection to the Yibam from both husbands. The Ilu Kansa, had he actually made Yibam, had Shimon actually made Yibam on A, have a Paka Zika the Kama. Then the Zika of the first wife of Reuben would have completely been discharged. One Shimon is Kainis A, the Almana of Reuben. The Zika of Reuben is completely discharged. And then V'chimais, and then if only afterwards Shimon died, then A would be following to Yibam to Levi, but only machmas the fact that she's the widow of Shimon. Or inami lo'aba but Maimer, or if Shimon would not have done Maimer at all, so then then this woman A would still be falling from Reuben. But now that Shimon made Maimer, we look at it like she's falling to Yibam to Levi from both Reuben and Shimon. So therefore, the pasuk says when a woman is falling machmas to 2 men, there's no din Yibam for that. Shimon Maimer, no, don't worry about it. And Rashi says why? Like we already learned earlier, and the svar is if you hold Maimer is koina and the Maimer of Shimon was effective, well then Eishes Sheni hu boil, then she's only falling to Yibam from Shimon. And if you don't consider Maimer to be a kinyan, then Eishes Rishon hu boil, then it's nothing, and then it's Reuben's alone. So basically, it's all or nothing. But the choylitz nishniya, you cannot make Yibam on both women because the chada loy miftera bebiya de idach. For sure, one will not become motor l'shuk with the bia of the others. Why? Dilma Maimer loikon. If Maimer is not koina, v'avlu beis Yevamos habois beis batim. Then what you have here is A is falling to Yibam from Reuben, and B is falling to Yibam from Shimon. They each need their own remedy. So therefore, you would have to remedy each of them. But you cannot do Yibam on both of them because the Yibumi Tavayu Nami Loi, because Dilma Maimer Kani. Maybe Maimer is Koina, and both of these women are considered to be exclusively Shimon's wives. And you're not allowed to do Yibam on 2 wives, right? Beautiful. Correct the Gemara. If this limud in the Mishnah, that when a woman is falling from 2 men, midairaisa, there's no din Yibam, Well, then chalitza nami loisi boy. Why does the Tanakama say in our Mishnah, Harei Choltos? Why would there be a need to make chalitza? There's no din yibum. You're bringing a pasuk that shows that there's no din yibum there. Zok to Gemara, Ela midrabanan. This whole thing of a woman who falls to yibum from two separate men, that there's no din yibum on her, that's not midoraisa. That's only midrabanan. So therefore, you do have to discharge the zika by making chalitza. Why would the rabbanon create such an isser? Ugzeira shema yoimu beis Yevamos habois mibayis echad misyabmos. The reason why we don't let them is because someone might look at this like the mimer is a real complete achnasa, and it's like both these women were completely married to Shimon, and there's no more zika from moving. And if we allow to make yibum on both these women, then people are going to think that if a man dies without children and he leaves over two wives, that you make yibum on both wives. And in order to prevent people from thinking that, we require chalitza on both wives. Frank the Gemara, they didn't have to go so extreme. Why did the Rabban make a gzeir that there's no yibum at all here? Let him make at least yibum on one of these women, and on the other one make chalitza, and then we'll never have to worry that someone's going to make yibum on both these women. That's also a problem, because there's a gzeira shema yoimu bayis echad miktsasei banui. People are going to think that whenever a man leaves over two almanas, it's not enough to make yibum on one of them. You have to deal with all of the wives, and you'd have to make chalitza on the other woman. So big deal. What's the big deal if someone makes an extra chalitza? There's no harm done in that. If they're going to do yibum on the first wife and chalitza on the second wife, hakanami, there's no harm done in doing chalitza on a woman who's completely mutal l'shuk. But the problem is, we're afraid that someone's going to first make chalitza on the woman on one of the wives, and then there's no yibum at all. And now the other wife is mamish and neshusach and it's a curse. But someone will think it doesn't make a difference, and he'll do yibum later. I'm wrong. It's not an isha curse anymore. Once there's a chiv from yibum, it takes off the isha shuzach. But there's a svara of kivin shloibana, shuv loibana. There's a pasuk that tells us that once someone makes chalitza and rejects the opportunity for yibum, there's an isser lav moving forward to be with these women. Rachman Amar kivin shloibana, shuv loibana. So since there's a lav to do that, we don't want to create a scenario where someone might get confused and do that. And therefore, it's chayil tzois for both of them. Amar Rav says a new halakha. This is very interesting. So let's just review our case. Shimon, Reuben died, left over A, and Shimon didn't do yibum on A. Shimon did mimer on A, on Reuben's wife. And then Nasan get lemamore. And Rashi is very clear. When he gave the get, he says, I'm not going to give you a get because I want to push you away. In other words, we know the halacha is, if a woman falls to yibum and the miyabim gives her a get, he's not allowed to do yibum anymore because he pushed her away. But here he made mimer, then he gave her a get, and he specified, my get isn't to push you away, my get is just to remove the extra added thing that I created with the mimer. So it's a meter get. No, his specification by the has an impact. We'll see from the Gemara. So Amarava, nothing get the Mamore. The Allah is Hutra Tzarasa. So what happened over here? Shimon did mimer on A, but Shimon was married to his own wife B. And then Shimon gave a get to A and said that mimer that I gave you, I rescind it. And then he dies. The halacha is his wife now will fall to Yibum. B, his wife, will fall to Yibum to Levi. Aval he Assur. But A will be Assur. Why should she be Assur? Right now, she's falling from Reuben because Shimon severed any connection here. So tomorrow, because the michlef of a balas get, because we'll confuse her with a woman who got a real get, a get that pushes her away. Here it was a weird type of get. A weird type of get. I'm only looking to remove my mimer. But if I gave her a real get, then you couldn't do even on her. So since it's hard to distinguish between a real get and not a real get, therefore we don't let her do even. But at least she won't spoil it for B.
the Gemara is supporting the get doesn't identify with the real get. Like
let's see Rashi. So let's see Rashi. Rashi explains it better.
We have a life, but you're not doing really. You're just
Here?
something else.
Okay, so let's see. Rashi explains it better than I do. But just let's see the next part. Look, it completely undoes the fact that he ever made mimer, and it's back to the situation before. Hutra afilihi. Levi could do yibum both on A, because now we look at it like she's following exclusively from Reuben, and he can do yibum on B because she's the almana of Shimon. My timer, my da'avid b'shakle. What he did, he undid, and nothing more than that. Let's see the Heilige Rashi. Nothing get the mamor. I'm on the second line from the top. Amas nisenkai. The Gemara is commenting on the words of the Mishnah. Shem nothing zeh ha'isa mimer get the mamorei. But below the zikase, he gave a get only to discharge the mimer, but not to impact the zika. The achagach meis, and then Shimon died. Hutra ishtai harishayna, woman B, who was Shimon's first wife, she'll be mutter to Zibam. She is the tzara through mimer of A. That was once upon a time Reuben's almana. Lisyabim. So Shimon's wife B can do Yibam. Lishlishi to the Levi. The mimer the mimer that Shimon did on A, chocolate, he removed. Valav tzaras to do, and therefore A and B are no longer tzaras because the mimer was removed. Don't ask how can you allow that, because someone will confuse that with somebody who two women fell to Yibum because they were both married to the husband. When we don't let one do Yibum, one do Chalitza. It doesn't look like it's mibayis echad. Since he gave the get and he removed his mimer, people will not confuse this with a real case when someone left over two wives. Therefore, in this case, we can allow Yibum on one, but in that case, I'm sorry. In this case, we will allow we will allow him to make Yibum on Shimon's wife, but we will not allow him to do Yibum on Reuben's wife. It's not because once someone gives a get to break the Zika, it creates an Isra Lav that no one's allowed to do Yibum anymore. The Poist al Achav Nishar. Sharei Lo Nosam get the Zika. He didn't give a get to take off the Zika. He only gave a get to take off the mimer. So why is A Assur to do Yibum with Levi? We're going to confuse her with a woman who really got a get even for the Zika. If he gave a get that was a full-blown get, that's even going to impact the Zika, that woman surely could not do Yibum. And therefore, we don't let her do Yibum. I will get the Mamorai, but if he only gave her a get for a mimer, loidochi ala mimer. All he's removing is the mimer. But technically, the Yibum would be allowed, but we disallow it because people aren't going to make a distinction between a meter get that's only for the mimer and a get that's even impacting the Zika.
Does the get itself have to be written with the intention?
I'm not sure if you have to write in the get that it's only for the mimer, or if he just says it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works. Let's see Rashi my da'avid chocolate.
We have such an idea that a person writes a get al tanai is not good because the get has to be a complete severance.
Well, not every tanai. A tanai that would not make it a complete severance. Because if the tanai is that you shouldn't go home for 30 days, after 30 days, it's a complete severance. But if the get says you should never go home, or you should never do something, so that's not a complete severance because she's always tied to him.
Here we have a complete severance, but it was only because of a weak kedusha, right?
Well, here's the different thing. It's the echos. The echos of the get isn't full, right? It's not a full power get. It's metered only to take off, to peel away one layer, not two layers. My da'avid chocolate. So the second sheet to hold that when you give get for mimer, that's all it does. It returns it, reverts it back to when Reuben was nifter. All it does is it makes it as if you never did mimer. And therefore, and therefore, A, the alman of Reuben, can now do Yibum with the surviving brother Levi. Machmazikas Echav Achiv Arishon, because of the Zika from Reuben. V'davka, here I answer your question, Chavi. V'davka shepirish l'maymorai. That's only if he, I assume pirish means he specified, I assume it means he spoke it out with his mouth. Usually pirish means he spoke it out. V'davka shepirish l'maymorai v'lo l'zikasik amar. That's only if he specifically said.
Mamora means with his mouth.
No, mamara means the get is for the mimer that I made.
So then Pirish might be in the get.
You think Pirish means he wrote it in the get? Maybe I would think they were actually the Dafka Shakosum boy. Pirish seems to indicate that he orally gave that over. Avostama, but if he gave it over without saying anything, then Kaima B'Loibana Akuluach. Bachi Muchamilta the Rabba Beperik Rabba Gamliel. So on Dafkin base, it seems like the Gemara is going to elaborate on that. Okay, Gebalt. Zok the Gemara. Okay, yeah, it says comma, that's right. So it seems like he's saying it verbally. Okay, now we're going to get into Isser Chal al Isser. Shnei Achen Nusuin Shtei Achayos. Reuben and Shimon are married to two sisters. We'll call them Leah and Rachel. Reuben is married to Leah. Shimon is married to Rachel. Umeis Achad Mehem. Rachman al-Tzon, Reuben dies, and now Leah is going to fall even to Shimon, but she doesn't fall even to Shimon because at that point Shimon is married to Leah's sister, which is a chiv karis, and there's no din yibum when there's a chiv karis. But the achad achamesa is shtosh sheni. But then Shimon lost his wife Rachel, so now that his wife Rachel is no longer alive, he in fact is allowed to do yibum on Leah. He's allowed to marry Leah. Zok Mishnah harizu Assur alav Yevamos. She is Assur to Reuven, to Shimon forever, because when she fell to Yibam at that moment, she was Assur to marry Shimon, because at that point Shimon was married to her sister Rachel. Therefore, even though the situation changed and now Rachel is not alive, she remains Assur to Reuven, to Shimon forever.
What's the svara behind that? In other words, if the whole idea of Yibum is so important to build up your brother's name, right? So why should it stop? Why should that be Assur to marry the sister after the other sister has died?
So I think that's a very good question. And I think that there's two things I would comment on that. The first thing is the mechanics. The mechanics of it is because once at the time of Reuben's death, Yibum wasn't allowed, then the Isser Eshes Ach remains. Once the Isser Eshes Ach remains, because the death is not capable of taking off the Isser Eshes Ach because of the other problem of a Chos Isha, so even when a Chos Isha eventually disappears, because Rachel dies, but the Isser Eshes Ach, at the time where it could have been removed, which is at the time of Reuben's death, it was not removed. Now that it was not removed, it remains not removed. So that's the mechanics. The svara behind it is the Recher Dak Chenaya. To make Leah, Reuben's going to wait around because maybe her sister will die. So basically we say there's no din Yibum here. Once at the time of death, Yibum wasn't possible. We don't put her into a situation where she has to wait to see if things will change, because that's not the Recher Dak Chenaya.
That's much more bishmak.
Well, they're both true.
I know.
They're both true.
But she didn't wait. What if she doesn't? She's not waiting for him. She's Assur. She's eligible to anybody at that time, isn't she?
If the halacha would be that if Rachel would die later, Leah does Yibum, then Leah wouldn't be able to marry anybody because she would have to wait to see when Rachel will die. And if there's still a Zika, then she would have to act on that Zika, and she wouldn't be able to get married.
The regular case of two sisters. Someone's wife dies, he's not married to his wife's sister.
Correct. Yeah, he's allowed to. We even had a case, I think it was in my cotton, where a tzaddik, I think it was Rabbi Yosy HaKohen, his wife died and left him with 6 children. And by the Kfura, he went over to his sister and says, "You want to come and marry me, take care of the kids?" He actually proposed to her right there in the basic forest. And I don't think he got slapped across the face. I think she knew the shidduch.
People do that all the time. As soon as the guy dies, by the shit, they try to buy the house.
Okay.
What?
Okay.
At the Shiva, the real estate agents who come and try to be Menachem are a bunch of fakers, but they're really just coming to see how they can.
You mean you're telling me a real estate agent going to a shiva is like a caterer coming to a vort?
Coming to work, it's worse.
It's worse.
It's worse.
Okay. Zog the Hela Gemara Vayt.
By the way, our color of our shirt, when I was sitting shirt in Mahalova, and someone actually had the thing that makes a disgusting remark from the law, this is not
Okay. Zog the Gemara. Zog the Gemara. Pshita. It's Pashit. It's Pashit because didn't we have a Mishnah earlier? Now, what we're about to learn, we actually learned already, and we learned the same Gemara by the last Mishnah. By the last Mishnah, it was exactly the same case. There was Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. In our case, there was only Reuben and Shimon. But in the last Mishnah, we had Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Reuben and Shimon were married to sisters, and Levi was married to a third party. And Reuben dies, so of course Reuben's almana cannot marry Shimon because Shimon's married to her sister. But what happened is Reuben's almana ended up marrying Levi, and then later, and after she married Levi, then Rachel died. Shimon's wife died. Then Levi died, and then there was a question if Shimon's allowed to do yibum there, right? And then Gemara said she can't do yibum because she was already Assur when she fell to Shimon the first time. She became Assur. So, Frank the Gemara, we learned this halacha already. Pshita. Hashta Uma Hosam, Madach in the last Mishnah, although this woman, when Reuben's almana fell to Ibam, she was not allowed to marry Shimon. True. But she wasn't totally rejected from the Friedman family because she was able to marry Levi. So she's still connected to that family. Still, the Mishnah earlier said, Amrit Loi, when Levi dies, even though Shimon is no longer married to Rachel, nevertheless, he still cannot do Ibam on Leah. Because when she first fell to Yibam from Reuven, at that point Shimon was married to Rachel, her sister. But Hacha, here, when Reuven died and his wife Leah fell to Yibam, Shimon couldn't do Yibam because Shimon was married to Rachel, and there is no other brother. So she's now totally rejected from the Friedman family. Loy calls again, for sure. In this case, Shimon will never be able to do Yibam on her. So why would this Mishnah state a halacha that's a smaller chiddush than a Mishnah which already stated a greater chiddush? So the Gemara, the same thing we saw several times before. Tana ha Tana Bereisha. Really, this is the first halacha that our Tana mentioned. Bahach chazil latera. And the last Mishnah, at this point, when the Tana wrote this Mishnah, thought that maybe that will be mutter, since the woman at the time, even though she couldn't do yibum to Shimon, but she did give him to Levi, so she's still connected to the family. He held that when Levi died later, and Shimon had already lost his wife, then Shimon would be able to do Yibam on her. That's what he thought. Mishari. That's what our Tana originally thought. Then V'hazer Chazil Yisura. And then he reconsidered, and he decided, this Tana, that no, even there it will be Assur. And since that halacha, which is a greater chiddush, is more dear to the Tana, Aktama. He placed it in the order of the Mishnahs even before this case, which is not such a great chiddush. And he didn't take out the Mishnah from its roster, from its order. So therefore, in fact, this Mishnah is really extra. But since it was already in the cycle, we didn't take it out. It's a svara that repeats itself in Yevamos a couple of times. I have another theory of why this is so rampant in Yevamos and not in other Masechtas, because in Yevamos, any little bit of chazara that we can have will be helpful, because we didn't get it the first time, but the second time, maybe we're going to get it the third time, so we actually need the extra chazara in Masechtas Yevamos. Tanu Rabbanan. Exactly. But it's more, I don't know if you noticed, we have the same Gemara. Anytime the Gemara asks a kasha between two Mishnayos in Yevamos, the Gemara asks it always in both places and answers in both places, which is not typical. I think the reason why they did it that way is because they realized how tough it is. So therefore, we get chazer. We had this shtickle before, but before it was a little bit confusing. Now maybe we're learning it again and give us a little bit of extra clarity.
Like I said, the Talmud themselves realized that a lot of people in this kind of
That's right. Tanu Rabbanan. But Allah, what happens if illegally?
That's the reason why they repeated it, because the Chacham were absent before, so they repeated it again.
Here. So Zakmar Ba'alel. What happened was Shimon now lost his wife. Shimon now lost his wife, and he did Yibum on this. Shimon lost his wife. Shimon is not allowed to marry Reuben's almana, right? He's not allowed to marry Reuben's almana. We already said it's Assur for him. What if he did wrong and he was Ba'ala anyway? He did the wrong thing. So what is Surimar here? Zog the Brisa. There's an Isra Eshazach Shaloi B'Mokar Mitzvah because he doesn't have the heter of people here, and the Mishum Achayis Isha. It's also Assur because it's his sister. Oh, so then I have to take a step back. This means he was Ba'ala while his wife was still alive. So basically, Reuben and Shimon were married to two sisters. Reuben dies, and Leah, Reuben's almana, falls to Shimon. Shimon's not supposed to do Yibum, but Shimon did Yibum anyway. So the Gemara says, the Bride says he's over on two Yisurim. There's no mitzvah of Yibum here. So therefore it'll be the Isra Eshusach. And it's also his wife's sister. So those are the two Averis he's going to get. He's definitely going to be in the dark house. Divrei Rabbi Yosy. That is the words of Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Shimon says, Einei chayiv elo mishum eshes ach bilvad. He's only going to be mechuyev for the Isra of Eshes ach. So you see already here how we're going to be getting into the sugya of ein Isra chalalis. So let's think about it. When a guy is married to his brother's wife's sister, so Reuben and Shimon is married to the sister of Reuben's wife. What Isra comes first? The Isra Eshes ach or the Isra Chayis? Which Isra comes first? It depends who got married first, right? No. If Reuben got married first, then Shimon was not married to Rachel at that time. So Shimon became Assur to Leah, Reuben's wife, because of Eshach, right? Then when he marries Rachel, now there'll be another Isra of Chayis. But what happens if he married Rachel first? So now Leah is already Assur to him after Chayis. So then when his brother Reuben marries Leah later, that's the second Isra. So depending on what happens, one Isra happens first, one Isra happens second. So if we're talking about ein Isra Chalal Isra, it's going to be very relevant which one occurred first, right? So that's what the Gemara is going to discuss right now. So Rabbi Shimon Omer ein Chayv Elo mishum eshes ach bilvad. You're only mechuyev on Isra eshes ach. For the Gemara, we have a steer about Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer ein Chayv Elo mishum achayis bilvad. So what is it? Which one is chal? So it depends on what happened. Kan shenosa chay ve'akach nosa meis. If first Shimon married Rachel, and only then did Reuben marry Leah, well, then Achayis comes first. And therefore, because the Isra Eshizach was never Chal, because Achayis was there first. But if Reuben first married Leah, so then right away, Shimon was also to marry Leah, because it's Eshizach, it's his brother's wife. So therefore, if he marries the sister, if he marries Rachel later on, that Isra won't be Chal, because in Isra Chal is.
How do we need to translate it? How does first marrying a dead person translate to?
No, in our case, the brother that had deceased, right?
That's how it is.
Yeah, that's why I replaced it with Reuben and Shimon, because Reuben, we killed Reuben. We could have killed Shimon. Rab Shimon. So let's go back to Rab Shimon. I'm sorry? Very good. They're both the Chiv Kares. They're both the Chiv Kares. That's right. So basically, there's an Isra Chomer. What if one of them was a more Chomer than Isra? That's also something that we're going to get into. But right now, they're both the same level of this. You can't get killed twice. Right? Gemara talks about that too. But if it was Shoyig, you can bring two Chomer Chapsis. So Zok the Gemara, Rab Shimon, but the Gemara is going to have another suggestion of the difference if it's you can't get killed twice. So what's the difference? The Gemara has that. Gemara covers that too. Rab Shimon, it impacts where you get to be buried. Rab Shimon, Heicha the Nasa Meis, Bachach Nasa Chai. If first Reuben married Leah, so the Isra Eshes Ach came first. The Achad Nasa Chai, and only then did the Isra Achayis Isha come. Kivan the Isra Achayis Isha Loi Chayil, since the Isra Achayis Isha was not Chal, right? So basically, when Shimon married Rachel, it didn't become a Achayis Isha. Why didn't it become a Achayis Isha? Because there was already an Eshes Ach. So if there's not a Achayis Isha here, Tis Yabam Yivumei. So after Reuben dies, let him do Yibum, because this woman is not Assur to him because it's his wife's sister, because that Isra wasn't Chal. That Isra wasn't Chal because there was an Isra Eshach. So let him do Yibum. Zok the Gemara, Amar Bashi, Isra Achayis Isha doesn't get eliminated. It's mitla tali v'koi. It's hovering over her, but it can't land because there's something in the way. There's something on the landing strip. So therefore it can't land. It's waiting for the old aircraft to clear the runway. Ipaka Isra Eshach. The moment by Misa, when Reuben dies, the Isra Beishach evaporates because of the Isra Yibum, so immediately it's going to land, it's going to clear the runway, and now the Isra Chosisha will land. Also, the Isra Chosisha v'chayil. The Helchach loy paka. And that's why it doesn't work. That's why either way, you cannot do Yibum.
Your explanation, when there's an error, the Ashes up doesn't disappear. It does.
You mean we have to change it a little bit, because if there's an Isra Chosisha, so then the Isra Eshesach wouldn't go away. But the problem is there is no Isra Chosisha because it's not Chal. So although if you're looking at it from 10,000 feet, yeah, the Isra Eshesach never goes away. But if you look at it closely, what happens is in a flash, in an instantaneous moment, is the Isra Chosisha was not Chal. So then for a flash, the Isra Chosisha goes away, and then the Isra Chosisha comes back, right? And the Assurs, and then I guess once that happens, the heter for Eshach gets eliminated. Or maybe that's hovering until the Isra Chosisha disappears and that comes back. But that's a good point. It's a good point. Okay, so now let's go analyze Rabbi Yosy, because Rabbi Yosy said you get two Isur, and that's what we're going to focus on now. The Sav Rabbi Yosy Isur Chalal Isur. Rabbi Yosy holds you get two petch. You get the petch for Achosisha, and you get the petch for Eshesach. How could one be Chal on the other? Well, Tanya, we learned over Avera Sheyeshba Shtei Misais. What if someone is over an Avera that involves two Isurim, and it'll make him be Mechuyev in two Misas Best? And Rashi gives us the example of what that case is. Kagoin Chamoisoi be Eshesish. His mother-in-law, which there's a Chiyuv Shreifa on, and an Eshes Ish, which is a Chiyuv Chenek. So he married his mother-in-law, and his mother-in-law happened to be married. So he's being over two Yisurim, and one has the Misa of Shreifa, and one has the Isra of Chenek. So which one does he get? Nidain B'chamura. He gets the more Chamer Deke Einish, which tells us clearly that both Yisurim are Chal, and therefore, if he's Mechuyev in a more severe Misa, and in the easier Misa, he gets the Chamura, because you can't kill somebody else. Rabbi Yosy Aimer, no. Nidan Bezikari Shoina Habola. It all depends on what came first. So, very, very simple. If his mother-in-law was married when he married his wife, well, then his mother-in-law was even also to him before he married his wife, because his mother-in-law was an Eshes Ish. And therefore, we say, Ein Yisr Chalal Isser, and therefore he would get Chenek if he lived with his mother-in-law because of the Eshes Ish. But if, when he married his wife, his mother-in-law was single, and only after he married his wife did his mother-in-law remarry, so then the Isra Chamoisha came first. So then, according to Rabbi Yosy, he would get Sreifa.
Saying that both Yisurim are involved, you're just saying what punishment.
Okay. But the question, it's a very good point. Very good point. But it has Nidam Bezika Rishoina Habal. So Freik the Gemara. So Zok the Gemara, let's analyze this. You're bringing up a very important point. Chamoisai v'nasas eiseshish. If it was first Chamoisai, and then his mother-in-law got married and became an eiseshish, Nidoin b'chamoisai. Since she was first Chamoisai, therefore he's going to get Shreifa. But Eishes Ish, the Nasas Chamoisai, Nidoin b'Eishes Ish. She's only going to get punished as an Eishes Ish, which is with Chenek. Zok Rashi, in Rashi answering your Kashamati, the third to the bottom line in Rashi, the last word on the line, Nidoin b'Eishes Ish, the Alpagav the Kilu, even though the Misa for Eishes Ish is only Chenek and not Shreifa. If he's also being over, if both Yisurim are there, and he's also being over on Chamoisai, so then why doesn't he get Shreifa? You see here that the Isra Chamoisai could not have been Chal, and there is no Isra Chamoisai here, because the Ichayli, if in fact that we say the Isra Chamoisai is Chal on the Isra Eshes, so then Tarvayu Allah, the Chayli Tarvayu Allah, if both Yisurim are here, then logic would say that if someone's Mechuyev Chenek, if someone's Mechuyev Shreifa, he should get Shreifa. No, he's alive now. The question is, who should?
No, I'm saying, once she had the Chiyuv, whatever was the easier one.
No, they come at the same time. They come at exactly the same time. He's born this one woman at one time, but no. He wasn't born her. She was first married, and then she became his mother-in-law. and after she was his mother-in-law and she was married, then he slept with her only once. He didn't do two separate Isurim. So the question is if there's only an Isser Eishes Ish on her, then Mamela gets Chenek. But if there's two Isurim on her, so by being boiler, he was over two Isurim, isn't it logical that he should get punished with the more severe punishment?
No, to me, it's more logical that he should get punished with the less severe punishment.
Why?
Why shouldn't we punish him?
Because a punishment is not a punishment. It's a kapara. It's a kapara. It's not a punishment. Okay. Zok to Gemara. So Zok to Amar Rabavo. So let's see what we're running out of time. Amar Rabavo. Zok to Rabavo. Moider Rabbi Yosy be'Isser Moiser. So this opens us up to a new concept. You're right. The Isser Chamoisai. I'm sorry. The Isser Eishes Ish. The Isser Eishes Ish might have come last. But Rabbi Yosy is Moider be'Isser Moiser. And Rashi says, Shehu Chal al Isser. Kagoin Isser Eishes Ach, the Moisafu. So the question here is, we proved according to Rabbi Yosy that you always go with the first Isser, which means we proved according to Rabbi Yosy, we say Ein Isser Chal al Isser. So if Rabbi Yosy holds Ein Isser Chal al Isser, how could Rabbi Yosy hold that when you have relations with your wife's sister, who's also your brother's wife, how can you hold that you get punished for both? You should only get punished for the one Isser that happened first. Zokt Gemara, you know why Rabbi Yosy holds in this particular case they're both Chal? Because it's Isser Moishe. And Rashi says, Rabbi Yosy is Moide B'Isser Moishe, Shu Chal al Isser. Kagoin, Isser Eishes Ach. If it was first Achos Isha, so if first Shimon married Rachel, which means Leah is also to him even before Leah marries Reuven, because now Leah is his wife's sister. And then Reuben married Leah, the Isser Eishach would be Chal. Even though it's already Assur al Tachos Isha, the Isser Eishach will be Chal. You know why? The Moisafu. The Isser of Eishach adds a lot of Isser, adds a lot of people into the scope of the Isser. When Shimon first married Rachel and Leah remained unmarried, Leah was Assur to Shimon. Leah was Assur only to Shimon, because she's a chayzisha, but umuteres l'chalecha, but she was mutter to all of the other siblings. Nisis la'echad mehen, but once she got married to Reuven, now Nesra al Kulon mishum eishesach. So Isser Moisef means since she's becoming Assur on all the other brothers, and there's no problem of a Isser Chal Isser for all the other brothers, we'll say that the Isser will fall on Shimon as well. So the achshav nitoysev Isser alel legabi shar echav. Umiku dechayel shem eishes ach Allah legabi shar achiv shoysim muteres lehem. Since anyway she is becoming Assur to the rest of the siblings because of eishes ach, chol nami hashem hazeh legabi didei. The Isser eishes ach will also be there in reference to Shimon as well. Even though Leah is already Assur to Shimon because Shimon's married to Rachel. Nevertheless, we say it's Chal because there's something called Isser Moishe. However, in our case, with Chamoishe and Eishes, Rabbi Yosy there says it's the first one. Why is that? But on Eishes that you then marry her daughter, the moment she was married, this woman is Assur to everybody. By me marrying her daughter, by me marrying this woman's daughter, it will not make her Assur to anybody else that she wasn't Assur to until now, because she already is Assur to everybody, because she's already an Eishes Ish. So therefore, you won't say that there's other people that are becoming Assur now, the Nema, so that we can say Migu Dechayla Layu Lechol Nami Olei. The high, the Chamoisai V'Nasas Eishes Ish, because if it was V'Nechol the high, the Chamoisai V'Nasas Eishes Ish. But if it was Chamoisai, if it was first it's Chamoisai, and then it became an Eishes, there's a Rashi, there Vada Isser Moisef. That would be Isser Moisef. You know why? When you had a single woman who is Reuben's mother-in-law, at that point, this single woman can marry everybody in the whole world besides Reuben, who's her son-in-law. If she gets married later, then Naasas Eishes Itoisef High Shame Allah, then this woman will become Assur to everybody. Since the Israel is Chal on everybody else, it will also be added to the Yisurim that are on her son-in-law. Chayanami legabe dahai. The high to come Rabbi Yosy nitin b'chamoisoi. So when Rabbi Yosy said nitin b'chamoisoi, it's only in a specific case. No, it's in both cases. It's in both cases. It's nitin b'chamoisoi. Mishum de b'misoi shaskina. We're discussing death. V'yata yochal amisoi b'beis misos. You cannot kill somebody 2 times. Hoyle shtein alav. Since there's 2 mises that are nigzer on him, even if you hold Isser Chalal Isser, but it's Isser Moisef, Yodin B'Chamura, we're going to give him the more severe judgment. But in fact, if it was a shogeg, he would bring 2 carbon chatois, because the Isser Eshes Ish will be chal on the Isser Chamoisoi, because it includes more people. Okay, Zog to Gemara Vayter. Tainach, when do you have Isser Moisef? That's Heicha de Nosachai. If first Shimon married Rachel, which made Leah Assur to him only because of a Chais Isha, the Achach Nosach said only then Reuben got married, which now extends the Isser of Leah to all the brothers. And we say Migu di Toisef Isser Legabe Achim, by Reuben marrying Leah now becomes Assur to all of Reuben's brothers. Therefore, a Toisef Isser Legabe Gidei. Shimon, even though Shimon was already Assur to Leah because of a Chazisha, he will also get the Isser of Eshes Ach, because the Isser Eshes Ach is chal for the other brothers. And that explains nicely why Rabbi Yosy holds that he gets twice petch, because both Isur Machal. But if Reuben first got married, and there was an Isser Eshes Ach already on all the brothers, and only then did Shimon marry Rachel, the sister, why should that become Assur? Why should the Isser of a Chosisha be chal? My Isser Moisevika. Who else is being included in the Isser? Nobody. This is going to be an Isser exclusively to him, and he was already Assur because it was Eshes Ach. So therefore, Frank the Gemara, why in this case does Rabbi Yosy say that he gets twice? It has to be 2 carbon chatas. If you want to argue, Migo de Itzer b'chulach vasa, since up until now Shimon was only Assur to marry Leah because it was Reuben's wife, but all of Leah's sisters he was allowed to marry. But now that Shimon married Rachel, so now not only is he Assur on Rachel and on Leah, he's going to be Assur on all the other sisters. So why don't you say the Itzer b'chulach vasa? High Isser. So Dr. Moore, you can't say that because high Isser Kollel. That's not called Isser Moisef. That's called Isser Kollel. Isser Moisef is when this Isser applies to more people. Not here, this Isser doesn't apply to more people. It just means that he's Assur on more women. But
Isser on all. Isser Kollel is the same Isser on more people.
no, it's not the same Isser. Until now it was Eshes Ach, now it's a Chosisha. But it's a Chosisha. The Chosisha isn't on more men, not more men are with Isser, but there's more women. So that's called Isser Kollel, and that's we don't necessarily hold of Isser Kollel. So therefore, why is it, since Rabbi Yosy does not hold of Isser Kollel, why is it that in this case, where it was first Eshes Ach and then a Chosisha, why does Rabbi Yosy hold you get petch for both? Now, Rashi has a very nice blurb that very clearly states the difference between Isser Moisef and Isser Kollel, and that is right over here. Isser Moisef, I'm at Rashi towards the bottom of the Amud. Rashi says Isser Moisef. Isser Moisef is Kisha Isser Moisef ala chaticha la'isri al mi sha'ayu mutar salav. I have a piece of meat, okay? I have a finger at the bottom. See my finger here? Oh, you don't? Okay, so I'll bring it down. I'm sorry. Now you see it? Isser Moisef. Isser Moisef. Kisha Isser Moisef ala chaticha la'isri al mi sha'ayu mutar salav. What happened? You had a piece of meat. This meat was only Assur for Reuben to eat, but it wasn't Assur for Shimon to eat. If a new Isser comes and makes it Assur for Shimon to eat as well, then that new Isser will also spread to Reuben. So the same thing over here. It was only originally was only Assur to Shimon because he was married to Leah's sister Rachel, and then it became Eshes Ach. So since it's going to be Assur now to more men, this piece of meat, referring to the woman, is now Assur to more men. Therefore, it's Isser Moisef. Isser Kollel is Isser Chal al chatichas acheres. You're not adding to which people are impacted by the Isser. We're only adding to the how much meat is Assur. So basically, we're looking at the woman not as someone who the Isser is upon her. She is the meat. She is the piece of meat. And this piece of meat will not be Assur to more men. There's more pieces of meat that are Assur, but the piece of meat won't be Assur to more men. Am I being recorded?
A little bit gross.
But
What's the title over here, Mark? What about me?
is that now not only is he Assur to this woman, but he's Assur to all of her sisters. He was only Assur to Rachel and to Leah. But now he's going to be Assur to all the other sisters that they might have.
Why?
Because once he's married to one of the sisters, he's automatically Assur to all the sisters. Because now they're all Achazisha.
Originally, it was only Isser of.
First he started off with Eshusach. It was Leah was Assur to Shimon because Leah was Reuben's wife. Now Shimon married Rachel. So now, because of Rachel, not only is he Assur on Leah, he's Assur on all the other sisters in the family. That's right. Because once he's married to one sister, he's Assur to all the sisters.
Originally, the Isser was her, everybody.
Originally, the Isser was Leah to everybody,
Now the Isser is Shimon.
to all the wives. So that's called Isser Kollel. It's not called Isser Moshe, because the piece of meat is not Assur to more people, but there's more pieces of meat that are Assur. So that's called Isser Kollel, and that's something that we don't necessarily agree to. So let's quickly see what the Gemara answers. So now we need to find a solution why Rabbi Yosy holds you get petch for both. Zok the Gemara, very, very simple. Ein echanami, you say Ein Isser, Chalal Isser. Ein Isser, Chalal Isser. So what does it mean when Rabbi Yosy says he gets petch for both? Alam Rava, it's Maila ani alav kilu Assur shtayim. But Vein Chayv alachas. Really, Ein Isser, Chalal Isser. And the Isser Achazisha was not Chal on the Isser Eshusach. But all Rabbi Yosy meant is we treat him like he did two Averis, even though he only did one. What does it mean we consider him? If he's only chayiv for one Aver, because what do you mean I consider him that he's so bad? You bury him with the biggest Rishoyim. You don't bury him with the people who are only over one Isser. You bury him with the Rishoyim who are over two Isser. That's what Tosfos learns. Rashi learns you bury him with the worst possible violators, and those are with the people who get skila and shreifa, because they have a separate place in the basic forest. It's called the skila shreifa section, and he gets buried there. Uve plukta and the tali in a machlokes. The itmar zar sheshimeis b'Shabbos. The halacha is a zar may not do avoid in the basic mikdash. The halacha as well is one may not do malacha on Shabbos. So what if a zar did avoida that was a malacha on Shabbos? He's chayiv two patch, one patch for the fact that he was a zar, and one that for the fact that he worked on Shabbos. He only is chayiv for one avera. Kavet Reb Chia b'nishpa. Reb Chia got up and swore, "Ha'avoida, I promise." Kach shemati mi Rebbe shtayim. Rebbe said that there's two averas here. Kavet bar kapara b'nishpa. Ha'avoida kach shemati mi Rebbe achas. Hischil Reb Chia Lodin. Reb Chia wanted to make a logical argument to indeed prove that there's two averas here. Shabbos l'chol nesra. Shabbos is Assur for everybody equally to do malacha. Kishahutra b'mikdash. There was a special heter to do avodah in the base of mikdash. Eitzel kaihanim hutra. The heter was only to kaihanim who can do avodah. L'kaihanim hutra v'lo l'zar. So therefore, if a zar does the avodah, yeshkan mishum zarus, yeshkan mishum Shabbos. There's two Isurim here. There's Shabbos and there's zarus. That's why it applies. He said no. Shabbos l'chol nesra. Shabbos was also for everybody. Kisha hutra b'mikdash hutra. In the base of mikdash, it's the place that controls the Isser, and there's no Isser Shabbos in this place. Therefore, ein kan elazarus. Therefore, there's no Isser of Shabbos there. There's only Isser of Zarus. We have two more examples of exactly the same thing. Balmum sheshimesh betuma. The halacha is that a kohen who is meshamish betuma by a carbon tzibur, when tumah hutra b'tzibur, is not a problem. But a balmum is never allowed to do avodah. So what if a balmum did avodah and he was tamei? Reb Chia Amar Chayiv Shtayim Bar Kapar Amar Ein Chayiv Ala Achas. Kavet Reb Chia v'nishba havodah kach shemati mi Rabbi Shtayim. Kavet Bar Kapar v'nishba havodah kach shemati mi Rabbi Achas. And then they had the same logical argument. Hizchel Reb Chia Lod Tumah l'chol nesra. Tumah is also for anybody to go into the base of mikdash. Kishahutra b'mikdash Eitzel Kaihanim Tmimim Hutra. The heter was only a kohen who's mutter in avoda. He could do avoda when he's tamei in the case of tum hutra b'tzim. L'kaihanim Tmimim Hutra v'leila bali moment. So therefore, yesh kamishum bali moment. The issue of doing avoda as a bal moment is here. Yesh kamishum tuma, because the heter for tuma was never given to someone who's a bal moment. Hiskul bakaparlot tuma l'chol nesra. Tuma was also for everybody. Kishutra v'mikdash hutra. The heter is in the base of mikdash for anybody. Therefore, ein kan el mishum bal moment. And then the next case is zor she'achal malika. Normally, when you eat when a bird, when they mark of a bird, they don't shecht it; they do malika, which is technically a nevela. But in a carbon, the kohen is allowed to eat the meat of the chatasoy. So zor she'achal malika. If a Yisrael ate it, who wasn't allowed to eat it, Reb Chia Amar Chayiv Shtayim out nevela and out carbon, out eating a carbon for a zor. Bakabar ma'ina chayiv alachas. Kavach Reb Chia v'nishba havoida kach shemati mirabbi Shtayim. Kavach bakabar v'nishba havoida kach shemati mirabbi achas. His Reb Chia lod nevela l'chol nesra. Nevela is also to everybody. It's only for the kaihanim that there was a heter to eat the oif. The kaihanim hutra v'lo zarim. Therefore, yesh kamishum zaris, yesh kamishum malika. There's the iser out the zar who ate it, and there's also an iser because it's the vela. It's chubakapar log. The vela l'chol nesra. The vela is also to everybody. Because hutra v'mikdash hutra ain't kan el mishum zaris. Therefore, there's no zaris. We'll stop here because these are interesting arguments. But at the end of the day, the whole shaila here will be related to iser chalal iser. So tomorrow we're going to learn the Gemara that explains how these are related to Yisrael Lister, Yisrael Lister, Moshe. We'll get into that. But the Val will stop here. Baruch Hashem, we finished at 6:56.
Let me ask you something.